Chapter 22. Salvation. It was one thing to resolve something in their hearts when away from the problem and another to open their problem when their heart was standing right in front of them. Dylan and Sky thought of a million ways to start this relationship, but every time lost the nerve to do so. So, they stayed away from each other most of the day. Dylan dragged himself back to the cabin that evening still undecided on what course to take. Sky made herself busy as soon as she heard Dylan's footsteps scuff across the wood porch. A quick glance at each other and an unspoken truce took place. No one said a word about the fight. Sky gave Dylan the space she assumed he wanted and stayed on the other side of the room. But the one-room house was small, so they were still within sight, if not actual arm's length of one another at all times. As the evening wore on, Dylan made his way to Sky's side of the room. He dropped down on the couch beside her and waited. When Sky didn't object to his presence, Dylan settled in. He glanced at Sky. She seemed happy. Here he sat picking at his nails, and she was lighting up the room with her smile. It was clear Dylan was trying something new in their relationship. He was always attentive to her, but tonight he upped his game. After Sky unknowingly gave a small, helpless gesture struggling with a jar in the kitchen, he rushed to her side to help. After opening the jar, Dylan and Sky returned to the couch. When he sat, he hauled in a huge breath and laid his arm across Sky's shoulders. She stilled. Dylan waited only a moment for any reluctance on her part. When he was sure she was breathing again, he lowered his hand down Sky's back to her waist and pulled her closer to him. Jesse's eyes widened, and so did his mouth. He was ready to burst until he got a soft whack and a stern shake of the head from Wade.
Sky's heart thundered at Dylan's touch. So many feelings raced through her, but the only thing she cared about was the fierce protection in Dylan's eyes. She glanced up at him from under her lashes, offering a radiant smile, showing Dylan her joy at the affection he showed. Finally. The thought surprised Sky. It had been her who held back the relationship. She hadn't realized how much she yearned for this. Sky snuggled a little closer to Dylan as talk swirled around her. She almost giggled. As was usually the case in a situation like this, everyone continued the conversation as if nothing unusual happened. Except for Jesse, he kept glancing their way, amusement covering his face. Sky caught his eye and gave the boy a wink. Jesse winked back and gave her a thumbs up. After a while, Sky cleared her fuzzy head and paid attention to Dylan and Wade's conversation. Winter planning was the topic at hand. In this new reality, meals took intense preparation. A stocked pantry could take months to plan and execute. The houses around them had been emptied out. In addition, some supplies were always difficult to find on the mountain. Fresh and frozen food was gone. Surrounding gardens had become thin, other than a late crop of root vegetables and the occasional overlooked squash. Winter was on its way. They needed to go further out for the remaining supplies before it was too late. If they didn't, they could starve. Personal feelings were wonderful, so was eating. The Cole household had been eating well. They wanted to keep it that way. Sky looked from Dylan to Wade. You don't think we're set for the winter? After all that canned food we found and the stuff we canned ourselves? She waved toward the extra storage space the men built to hold it all. We have a lot of cans, no doubt about that, Wade said, and with Dylan's hunting, we should be good. But it needs to last through the spring. Till we get a new garden going? I think we need to make a run to a big store or distribution center for some other things before winter comes. Dylan nodded. I'll ask around and see what'll be the best one to try. Someone might know something. I'll practice canning with the vegetables you brought in today, Sky said. I appreciate the training, but I want to try it by myself, so I'll be ready for next year. I want to forage with Dylan tomorrow, Jesse said, not wanting to be left out of the action. Sky smiled at Jesse. Stalking anything, beast or vegetable, in the forest with Dylan was fast becoming one of Jesse's favorite things to do. Remember, Wade repeated the same instruction he gave with every fruit and vegetable they found: when you're chopping up the vegetables, keep the seeds. One of the problems they faced was that most seeds didn't reproduce properly anymore, so Wade hoped some of what they found were heirloom seeds. Agriculture was new to Skye, and she had been unaware there was a difference between any kinds of seeds. But now she had been carefully educated that it was heirloom seeds most likely to give a dependable crop. Save the seeds, Jesse chanted as if it were a song. The adults laughed at his antics. Dylan's deep laughter drew Skye's attention. Her gaze moved from Jesse to the man beside her. Their eyes met, Dylan's bold gaze holding hers until she blushed and looked away. His fingers tightened at her side. Dylan changed the topic of conversation. While I was out, I looked up the neighbors. No one in this area has been sick or died in the last week or so. Maybe this thing is dying down a bit. That would be wonderful, Skye said. Casualties well over the 70% predicted by disease control had decimated the mountain. And it was better off than the towns. Those on the mountain had done everything they could to protect themselves from those infected. It led to some ingenious arrangements for helping others. Skye had never seen such generous people. They shared help and supplies, often letting each other know where a needed item could be located. When Skye mentioned this must be what it was like in the early days of the settlers, Dylan assured her it was always this way on their mountain. When it seemed the essential issues were discussed, Skye quietly asked Dylan if they could speak on the front porch. Dylan nodded and grabbed a blanket. Once they were seated on the porch, he carefully wrapped it around Skye to keep the chill air off her. Skye's stomach fluttered as she gazed up at Dylan and was pulled into the dark blue depths of his eyes. She was content with that, was all she could endure really. Her hearing narrowed to the two of them, every thump of her heart, every breath he took. Jesse's voice floated through the log walls. What are they doing out there? Skye and Dylan laughed, breaking their gaze. So, Skye said with a shy smile as she traced a nameless pattern on her jeans, I guess we've moved past friends. I believe we have, Dylan said with a serious tone. Skye gave a nervous giggle. He continued, it's what you want, Skye, right? I can handle it if it's not. I reckon I'd rather have the part of you I can, than nothin' at all. Skye nodded. It's what I want. Her green eyes shone with happy, unshed tears. But we need to talk. There are things in my past you need to know. Things making this harder for me than it should be. Some movement or sound that Dylan made, Skye wrongly interpreted as irritation. Quickly, she said, this isn't about you. Skye winced. Her heart dropped, worried Dylan would mistake her meaning. And she was right. Dylan tensed and bolted to his feet, but Skye was faster. Skye grabbed his bicep with both hands and pulled, stopping him. Dylan watched her hand slide slowly down his arm, past his elbow, his forearm and wrist to take his hand in her two small ones. She tugged his hand to her stomach and held it there, giving him no choice but to return to his seat beside her. No, listen. I know you think it is, but it's not. You are affected by my problems. But this problem started a long time ago. You aren't my problem. You are my salvation.